Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie Adasi, she, her pronouns. I am the head of inclusion, diversity, equity, and allyship, or IDEA here at Greenhouse. And I will be your host for today's discussion on Stay People First During Turbulent Times. Before I introduce my speakers, I have a few housekeeping items to ensure everyone has the best viewing experience possible. Be sure to use the chat box to add your thoughts during the discussion. For any tech-related issues, use the Q&A box, and one of our producers will be here to help you. If you'd like to enable closed captioning for this session, toggle the CC button in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And lastly, today's webinar is being recorded and will be shared via email within the next day or so. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists. If you all could share your name, pronouns, title, a little about your company, and anything personal too. I'd love to hear something personal about you all. And Kenysha, would you like to go first?
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm Kenysha Bartee. Pronouns are she, her. I am the Senior Vice President of People and Culture at SoundExchange, a music technology company that administers royalties to artists on non-interactive streaming platforms and advocates for fair pay for all creators. I have 20 years of experience in process improvement in the legal field, with 10 years focused on how to make the workplace somewhere people feel like they belong through career development, wellness, and competitive pay. I'm really happy to be here with you all to discuss this topic of people first, specifically with some excellent leaders in the space. So thank you for having me.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much, Kenysha. Lars, if you want to go next.
Yes, thank you. My name is Lars van Wieren. I'm the pronouns he, him, his. I'm the founder at Start. And we help companies create an inclusive and equitable recruitment process by measuring how candidates from different demographics experience their application. We do this natively integrated with the Greenhouse, and we are their preferred partner for this topic. And I'm calling in from Amsterdam, and I have 2 little daughters.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Lars. And Paul, so happy to have you here. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Happy to be here. My name is Paul Saiedi, and pronouns he, him, his. I'm a global director of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Uber. Most people know what Uber is. We're a mobility service moving people around and products around and delivering them real time around the world. But when I think about what I do, I try to bend organizations towards inclusion and equity every day, no matter where I'm at, inside and outside of work. And something personal and interesting about myself is that I'm, located in Brooklyn, and cloudy Brooklyn today. And I am a hardcore sci-fi junkie. A lot of people don't know that about me, but the more like spaceships, aliens, all that kind of stuff, I'm always down for it. I need that escapism from kind of the work that we do sometimes.
I absolutely love that. And believe me, you and I are going to have some conversations after this, Paul. I did not know this. Well, thank you all. Thank each of you for, taking some time to introduce yourselves. Before we dive into the questions, I did want to give a quick overview of the topic for today and why this topic is so important to cover right now. So at Greenhouse, we believe that people-first companies prioritize their people and foster a culture of inclusion and hiring. In today's highly competitive and connected world, investors, consumers, and candidates are all paying attention to how your company handles IDEA or DEIB issues. To foster innovation and stay competitive, companies need to embrace IDEA as a core value and as a strategic priority. It's no longer a nice to have. Focusing on building connections for employees, especially in a remote and hybrid world, is extremely important to maintain employee sentiment and engagement. Being flexible and transparent, employers goes a long way. And IDEA programs, they really create equitable environments for all employees, no matter how they identify. And this leads, as we all know, to higher employee retention, innovation, and can then also give your company a competitive edge, especially in today's current turbulent market. So with all of that, let's go ahead and actually start today with a defining question. And so the question I have for you all: what does being people first mean to you? We'll go with Lars, Kenysha, and then Paul. Go ahead, Lars.
Thank you. For me, this means prioritizing individuals' well-being, rights, dignity, and experiences over other considerations within an organization. And maybe good to give 3 examples. So first of all, respecting individual identities. So that means acknowledging and valuing the unique identities, backgrounds, also the experience of every person. And maybe an example is at Start. The last interview we do at Start in the hiring process, it's an interview with me. And if it's a salesperson, I won't ask them like hardcore sales question. The fact that they made it to the last interview, it means that they should be good at sales. But the last interview is really about our core values around our culture. So that's what I focus on. And it allows me and the company to hire people from like different backgrounds, because I really also look for like different answers than I've seen in the past. And that has led to a very diverse culture at Start. And also it improved our acceptance rate. So since we are actually talking more about values, and I'm committed to doing the value interview, we've seen a spike in acceptance rate, and even candidates that are actually out of our league, so would normally go for like a bigger tech company and make far more money, they eventually go with Start, because they say the fact that a founder is so committed to values and diversity and inclusion, that means a lot to me. So that's the first thing. The second thing is flexible policies and practices. So it also means tailoring these policies, practices, and processes to accommodate the diverse needs people need. Maybe an example is that already before COVID, before the whole remote movement, we already had a policy that you could work from your home country. Because what we also heard or find out is that people said, I would love to visit my family again. But when I go there, they are all working. So during the day, I have nothing to do. And all my PTO time is going there. So that was already a thing we did before COVID. And the last thing is, for me, is it's transparency and accountability. So also like being transparent about your ID goals, your progress, and your challenges. Maybe a good example is, in our case, is that we just merged our company with our biggest competitor. So that is great news, but right now not so much for diversity inclusion, because it showed or it led to some or imbalances in the different departments. So we're actively addressing them during our town halls, and although it's not something we can change tomorrow, by addressing it and already making plans how to fix it, that's important to people.
Lars, I hear you kind of saying that last one, what gets measured gets improved, hopefully here. And so, even with some challenges, being honest about that, I think is critical. So thank you for sharing. Kenysha, we'll head over to you. People first.
Yeah, so Lars, I really like what you said, specifically around values, right? And really making sure when you're bringing people on, you really focus on their values and not just their skills. I think that is highly impactful in creating a people first environment. Some of the similar things as Lars stated, I think people first means nuance and flexibility, like he said, compassion and understanding, while also ensuring the needs of the business are being met, right? It is not impossible to ensure you have a happy employee and the business needs are being met. So the way that I think you can do this easily is being very consistent, right? It's when a company is inconsistent or applying, their handbook or applying the way they interact with employees in different ways. And so that means you have to be really, really in tune with the managers, with the leaders of the company, to ensure that they understand that they need to be consistent when they're talking to their employees. And then understanding that different employees do need a unique approach, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the business needs don't be met or that the outcome is any different. I would also say, to keep in mind that when you're saying people first, it might not be all the same people at all the same time, right? You may have to focus on different groups of people to make sure that you are impacting them in a way that best benefits the business. You may have to focus on your external consumers at some points, and making sure your internal teams are really focused on getting projects done for the company. So being okay with, right, the ebbs and flows of people first is something that I think is very important for a leadership team.
Kenysha, you hit so many great points there, from the ebbs and flows part to consistency. Just thank you for sharing, your leadership with us. And Paul, I'm going to hand it over to you for your thoughts around the term people first.
Yeah, I just want to say, I have to respond to some of what the other panelists said. So Lars, I love the last interview, right? If you make it to the last interview, it's actually really simple and smart and tactical. And I love it. And I think I'm going to recommend that for some of our processes here. I really like it though. It's smart if you think about it, because we put people through so much to get to that stage. And Kenysha, flexibility is the name of the game when you think about this. When I approach the people first concept myself, I think about, I guess I'm thinking about it more philosophically, right? So like, what are the two questions you ask yourself as a leader in an organization if I'm putting people first, right? And so first, I think about it from the me standpoint, like Paul in an organization or any employee joining an organization. I think people first. And when I think about that, what that means is see me, interact with me, work with me for who I am and for what I do. I think so many times in organizations, we interact with people just for what they tactically do for or with us on a project. But we need to be able to do that and seeing people for who they are. So like not minimizing the difference that's in the room and not minimizing how culturally different we all are, even within our own ethnicities, even within our own identity groups. We can't flatten them. So allow the complexity to be there. And then I think from an organizational standpoint, I actually said this once when I was actually talking with the chief people officer at Greenhouse, Donald, and I think organizations every single day already put people first. We put people first in every decision that we make at all of our companies. The question is, which people are you putting first? And so we're already prioritizing groups every day, and we're putting certain people first and others second and others third and others not considered at all. And so instead of radically creating a new process, I think in the processes that already exist, we can ask ourselves, which people are we prioritizing by solving for this challenge this way? And it opens up a space to have a discussion to say, oh, we're always prioritizing this function or this org or this group of people or this region. And to Kenysha's point, even with customers, right? Like which customers are we putting first? Is it a general amorphic customer? Maybe that's good for a rapid growth phase, but maybe we actually need to do some niche focus on other people, put other people first. So organizationally for me, it's about denaturalizing who we're already putting first and making that part of the question when we roll things out. And then from a personal standpoint, it really is see me for who I am, not just what I do for you.
Oh my goodness, y'all. We're on the first question and I'm just getting so many gems right now. I've been taking my notes over here. The which people question, even when you think about like diversity and inclusion for who, Paul, like you're hitting it on the nail. And also looking at yourself as a leader first. I think that also is really critical in how we think about this concept. So thank you all for your answers so far. I'm going to go back to Lars really quickly. We have an answer that came in here on the chat. What are you thinking about when you think about interviewing? A little bit what Paul was asking and sharing about that last interview. We'd love to hear a little bit more there.
Yeah. If I can add one more thing. Also, what I really like about doing a value interview, it's not that I'm asking three questions. I'm actually explaining the 5 values, and also by explaining the values in a way, they also commit to those values. So they can't say after 3 months like embrace and drive change. Yeah, that's not who I am. I don't like this company. So and that's an important thing to say about culture. Back in the days, I think 10 years ago, when you went into the Airbnb office, and I won't say it out loud because my mother might be watching, but on the wall, there was this big sign saying, don't up the culture. And it would imply that there was like this one moment in time when the culture was perfect. Don't touch it. So everything we will bring in, they should all be exactly like this culture. And they, after a couple of years, they also took it down and they said, what were we thinking? It's like, it's constantly changing. And that's also with the value interview that you can actually hire for differences instead of homogeneity.
Talk about it. Talk about it. Hiring for differences, y'all. Okay, we have so many great quotes already. Let's keep it going. Thank you for that, Lars. So next question. The current climate and landscape around DEIB idea has been challenging, as we all know, for many practitioners and companies. And this is not new to us, but with so many idea roles specifically impacted at companies that were forced to do layoffs, especially over the last couple of years, how can companies rebuild programs after losing kind of these important roles? And we'll start with Paul, go to Lars, and then Kenysha, I'll have a little bit of a specific question for you. So Paul, your thoughts?
It's a really good question. And I think one thing important to recognize is that not all companies are the same. They're not all situated the same. They're not all resourced the same. They're all at different stages of growth and maturity. And I think it's important to call that out, because whether it's well received or not, what diversity, equity, inclusion look like at different scales and sizes of companies, depending on what the company's doing, differ vastly. So I just want to first give companies the diversity of complexity that they deserve, and what a small company of 400 to 500 people needs is going to look different than what a company of 30,000 needs. What I do think happened in our industry over the last 4 years is an explosion of roles. And I think partially smaller companies that were at more foundational stages hyper invested, and that's great. More equity, more diversity, more inclusion, I'm down for that. But I think sometimes they grew those teams bigger and faster than what they were ready to execute on, and then had to reverse some decision making there. And then I think when you think about loss of programming, loss of work, one thing that's really important to understand is that these ebbs and flows of legal changes, they're not new. They might be new to this cohort of DEI practitioners in this generation. This has been the DEI space from the jump. And so the one thing that you need, and I think that companies should think about, is having people in the DEI space, like the people on this call, who, yes, we have passion for the work, but we have hardcore skills and experience in the work. I think a lot of times in organizations, they elevate the people who are passionate and are saying, oh, I want to lead this. I want to do this. I care about this. You need that. But you also need the ability to influence global executives, to understand HR deeply and change processes and programs. And I think, one of the things that's happened is a little bit of passion flooding the space with not enough experience, and during a critical time, at least in a US context. And so it's a boom bust moment. So as we rebuild, as companies rescaffold this work, I think companies understand they need it. But I think what they can do is make sure that they're bringing in people with robust experience and passion. Passion does not experience in this space. You need both, because on the hard days, it's really hard. And you can't meet that just with passion. It's bigger than that, because what we're pushing against and what we're changing and what we're trying to influence are the ways that systemic forms of oppression and injustice manifest themselves in a corporate environment. And when you're thinking about an approach to that, you need a systemic, rigorous, and researched approach. So for me, that's data, data, data. Yep. And every program that you solve, start, and create should be grounded in data from the beginning, validating the problem, and then tracked through the process. I know that was long, but
necessary.
That's how my brain works.
Necessary, Paul. Come on.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Literally amazing. Woo, we are lucky right now. I just want everyone in the audience to feel this energy we have here today. These experts, thank you for that drop of knowledge, Paul. I really feel seen and heard by what you just shared as a DEI practitioner, that part about experience plus passion. Passion won't get you far here. It just won't, so thank you for that. Lars, I'm gonna go to you, and then Kenysha will wrap up this question.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. It will be hard to add a lot of interesting stuff after you, but let's try. I will focus on companies that might have lost these important roles. So obviously we're having a dedicated person or team for this ensures it will stay on the agenda. it shouldn't be to let go of these practices when times are tough and there's no dedicated budget for this. So I think it all comes down to both planning and commitment. Let me explain that. First of all, I think it's important to form a group of enthusiasts. So I make sure it's a good representation of the company. And most companies use the famous OKR framework to make quarterly plans and really ensure also for this group of people that it's part of their OKRs, that their managers also understand, like, hey, we used to have this ID team. It's not there anymore, but it should stay on the agenda. We now have a group that's willing to also help out, but that's for both the individual and for the manager, it's clear I'm allowed to work on this. Secondly, it's important, obviously, to let this group access the current state, because obviously before the layoffs, a lot of work has done. It would be a waste to throw it all away. So let's see what progress has been made and what gaps exist. Data and feedback are obviously important for this. Furthermore, set clear goals and metrics. Communicate the renewed IDs to all employees. Track and evaluate, and obviously, last but certainly not least, also acknowledge and celebrate all the achievements here. And maybe if I can add one last thing also, because we're a smaller company. So I think for small companies, this can actually be, I already mentioned it during the hiring process, but the ID can actually be an unfair advantage. So if you focus on it already on your career page, but also in your in the job descriptions and during your interview process, if they really have the feeling this company is focused and obsessed about idea, it can help you land talent you would normally not land.
Oh, I'm just unmuting myself. Thank you for continuing. I love that. Again, that focus that Paul just started us off with, data being everything, continuing that focus. And you're right, it's very different for different size companies, Paul and Lars. So I actually want to go to you with that question, Kenysha. When you think about, are there any suggestions that you might have for smaller companies, maybe without larger budgets, ERGs, committees, et cetera, that can still help them be an inclusive place to work?
Yeah, sure. Before I get to that, though, is it okay if I respond to some of the other panelists?
Yeah.
I really like the term Paul used, the boom bust effect, right? Of the downsizing of DEI teams across the nation. And, let's be real. It was the George Floyd effect, right? It was, some companies were very misinformed about what DEI really is, and they were being reactive, right, to the cultural landscape. They didn't believe in the changes, some of them, or they didn't resource those changes properly, and they weren't educated about the needs of their employees. The employees were crying out for support. They were crying out for corporate accountability. And a lot of these companies, I won't say they overreacted, but they reacted improperly, right? And so I do think that the primary keys to rebuilding these programs, maybe without a full DEI team or very strong DEI leadership, would be leadership belief, like the executive team's belief that DEI advances company initiatives, period. I'm taking a gem out from Deion Sanders, right? It's not buy-in anymore. Like, we don't need you to buy in because you might resent the money you had to spend to buy into the program, right? We need you to be believers of what a diverse workforce brings to the table. Also, secondly, I think integration of inclusion methods into everything you do is important, right? While it is very important to have a leader for DEI and culture initiatives, inclusion, belonging, social justice, I maintain that's very important. But if you don't have it, you have to make sure that your leadership team and your people and culture teams, your HR operations, they have methods to ensure that there is equity, right, in every process that we have. Education and data, Paul went through that very well, but also providing resources to people and culture, communications, philanthropy, to continue the work of wellness, belonging, DEI, and justice. So Those resources could be budget dollars, but they could also be allowing employees to take the time for training or to take the time to volunteer. Some companies don't even offer that much, right? Also, the ability to hire consultants, right? If you're not going to have someone in-house, at least provide a budget for either your executive leadership team or your people and culture team to have consultants to ensure that you're advancing social justice and belonging initiatives. I also think that they should recognize and reward employees that are doing the additive work, right, to advance DEI in the workplace. This could be by way of monetary bonuses, but it doesn't have to be. It could be training, additional training dollars for that team. It could be included in their annual goals, as Lars mentioned. Just a way to recognize the people that are going the extra mile to ensure that the internal teams are educated and aware about, DEI in the space.
My goodness, this is so good. I got so much from that. I think, Paul, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, no, Kenysha, you just dropped like 20 tactical gems for anyone who's doing this work at a small to mid-sized company and like different ways to position. So definitely agree with all of those. But I'm really shook by the not buy-in but belief framework. I think that I'm still in that. And I'm gonna actually say it to someone later today. And I also think, based on what Kenysha said and what Lars said, something that I was like, to be tactical. Most DEI functions are subordinated underneath the chief people officer. There's nothing wrong with that. Lots of companies justify that situation for all kinds of reasons. It is much rarer for a DEI leader to report directly to the CEO. Even a lot of organizations, someone will have the title Chief Diversity Officer, but still have a reporting line to the Chief People Officer. And I think we need to change that over time. And I think for smaller companies that are establishing their functions from the beginning, I think that there is a lot of power in doing that. Because a DEI function doesn't generate revenue in a way that an organization normally understands it. It does, but not in a tactical P&L mindset kind of way. There's lots of reasons why it's seen as a center of excellence within the human resources function. And because so much of our work is about influencing that, there's lots of reasons why that makes sense. What I want to say is, in this moment of rebuilding, think about establishing DEI as a direct line to the C-suite and to the CEO. If you have the belief and you're not trying to search for buy-in, in the words of Kenysha. I think in that kind of situation, what you do is you bulletproof, you foolproof DEI from in lean times or in boom times. It's always there. It becomes something that you can cut off and eliminate if you subordinate it. And so I think if it's core to a business, if on your company page it says, we are this, we believe in this, this is core to us, think about making the move and giving it its own business line and its own direct reporting line. That is an action that puts DEI at the center of the company and makes it more than just talk. It doesn't mean you can't do amazing work reporting through the chief people officer function. I'm just saying, if you have the chance to reboot that right now, think about that.
Wow. Paul, I come from a history of being on a team, to your point, that did report into the CEO. And you're right, as far as influence is concerned, as far as when things got a little bit harder in the teams, et cetera, like our team was consistently prioritized. I'm grateful even at Greenhouse, even though I am under the people function, we're still prioritized, right? But depending on where you are, especially as a smaller company, that may be an amazing place to start. So you all are just here. You're doing great work here. I think let's keep going. I'm going to probably skip a couple questions, but we have all seen the data. You're probably very done with the data, but data is important for us too, right? We know diverse companies create innovation and increase profits. We know diverse hiring is a part of that. In a time where companies may not be hiring as much, do you all have any encouragement for leaders on how they can continue their focus on idea to be prepared for when they are hiring again? And you can add anything different if you haven't already spoken on this topic. And I'm going to start with, my apologies, Kenysha.
Yeah, I think that along the lines of making sure ideas integrated into everything you do, you want to ensure your most basic processes are sound, right? Your performance and talent management, your leadership feedback loop, of course, your payroll and benefits, right? If those things, if employees are discontent with those things, or they have a lack of access to development opportunities, or there's inequity in pay, or there's just something off about everyday processes, then they won't be able to see past those their basic needs, right? To also to be able to highlight the work of DEI, right? Or to be able to understand it. So I do think that foundationally, a company has to be sound to make sure the employees feel safe. That is important. And when a company's not hiring much, retention becomes even more important, right? So not only our, onboarding training or your functional skill-based training, but to Lars' point earlier in the conversation, begin focusing on the values. Do a values campaign at your company. Do your leaders even know what the values are? Like they're beautiful on the website, right? But if you go around with the microphone and say, hey, could you tell us 3 of your 6 values? Who's going to be able to do it? And so highlighting what is already built into your company. You do not have to recreate the wheel, but you can amplify, highlight all those key words, what you have already spent a lot of time building, and ensure your employees feel that, and that the leadership and employees are living those things day to day. That's how you can continue to retain the great employees that you have when you're in a hiring crunch.
Well, goodness gracious, this is good. Kenysha, thank you for that. Paul, do you have anything to add? And then Lars, if you have anything after that.
Yeah, I love what Kenysha said too. I think, when I think of retention, when I think of retaining employees, I don't think retention is, you don't have a retention program, you have an engagement program. And retention is the outcome of strong or weak engagement, right? And so to build off what Kenysha said around retention, I think what the values exercise is great. You have to sort of triple down on inclusion during these times, right? Where hiring slows down, and it's not going to be the last time. And then it's not going to be the last time that all of a sudden companies switch and say, we need to hire 2,000 people this year, right? If you're around long enough, you know that these are cycles. And so as we go through one of these cycles, I think the intention and focus on inclusion, and the kind of inclusion I'm really thinking about right now, is both in terms of remote and a decentralized workforce, as well as a globalized workforce. And I think the complexity of collaborating globally right now in terms of engagement is getting harder and harder as the world gets more polarized and complex. And so really leaning into cultural competency and understanding cultural competency, right? It wasn't until I was at a company that had formerly been Copenhagen based, but now was San Francisco based. And I was sort of resolving conflicts on the daily between our Copenhagen leaders and our San Francisco leaders. And it wasn't until I went and spent a month in Copenhagen and I was like, oh, okay, the culture is so different. And the directness of communication is so different, especially for a US based or an American like me. All of a sudden I realized the ideas weren't what were at conflict. What it was, our Copenhagen colleagues would just be like, that's a horrible idea, we shouldn't do it. Just like very direct. And an American colleague would be like, they hate me because they said that, right? And in the US, if they shared their ideas, our US leaders were just like, oh, that's interesting, we'll think about it, we'll get back to you, and our Copenhagen colleagues were like, oh, they're lying to us, they're not being honest, I can't trust them, And so what we saw was, it literally was lack of cultural competency about high context and low context cultural communication, as well as different styles of communication. And so what we did, there's all kinds of cool, maps like Culture Map and Globe Smart that you can use to, prioritize these kinds of communication. And I think that these are the kinds of, when I think either values-based or intercultural or cultural competency-based things that allow people to see each other again more for who they are, not just what they do. Like when I'm interacting with my Danish team, I'm like, all right, They're going to be real direct and honest with me. It's not personal. Get into it, you know? And I've learned to actually like that. It's actually quicker to get the work done now, right? And so I think I just share that context to say, this is a time to lean into programs, communication, and bettering those things. And that's what I'm advocating at Uber. But I think it's actually, no matter what size of your company, it's a good time to do that.
Yes, yes, yes. The nuance there that you just described on the globalized workforce, decentralized workforce, being remote, all of the things. And to your point, those communication norms and cultural norms that really impact how we show up every day at work with who we are. Paul, thank you for sharing that. That for me, I just took a lot of gems myself for Greenhouse. Lars, do you have anything you want to add there?
Well, we just merged with a Copenhagen-based company, so thank you, Paul. No, it sounds familiar. It was also, but luckily the Dutch and the Danish, they share their directness. So it was also when I moved to London, I had to find out that the Dutch are too direct to be polite and the British are too polite to be direct. So that mismatch was also something I had to get over. Yeah, but yeah, Jamie once got a great question. And for me, it's actually focused on these three things. So also in this particular case, reinforce the business case. Remind leaders of the clear business benefits of diversity, including increased innovation and profitability. And that's not just about hiring, but also, echoing Paul, about improving organizational culture and performance. Secondly, recognize, reward, and promote inclusive behavior. Implement recognition and reward systems that acknowledge, that celebrate, and promote leaders that exemplify inclusive behavior can definitely contribute to your ID goals. And the last one, but please forgive me this professional deformation, but measure and report progress. So continue to track and report on your ID metrics, even during periods of reduced hiring. All leaders should have, I believe, easy access to data that illustrates the progress of the company and the areas that need improvement.
Yes, you, Lars, you're helping us kind of go into my next questions. Like you already knew where I was going with thinking about, and I'm going to keep with you, Lars, on this one. How do you ensure and measure your company's commitment to ideas? So it's kind of what you're just talking about. I've heard OKRs being thrown out over here. What are some of the tactical ways folks can actually focus on that within their own companies? And then we'll go to Kenysha and Paul.
Yeah. For me, there are two parts to measuring ID in recruitment. First, let's call it the hard data, where you check if you have a diverse hiring pool and if you're also hitting your hiring numbers in line with this hiring pool. But secondly, and maybe that's even more importantly, is it's the soft data. So having a diverse talent pool is a good start, but you need an inclusive hiring process too, obviously. If I look at how we work with Greenhouse, is that first and measure based on different demographic data, so that you can really drill down into your candidate experience data on the most important demographics to get an understanding of how candidates from these different demographics feel about the recruitment process. Secondly, gather data also to see if your candidates felt welcomed by your team and your company. Because if the atmosphere was open, if it was inclusive, and if the recruitment team were respectful during the interview, that can obviously really boost your ID goals. And lastly, obviously, act on what might be hindering these efforts. So it's hard to fix something if you don't know what the issue is. We often say start is where opinions become data, because what you often see is that there might be like one remark on Glassdoor, or a candidate said something, and that one opinion is certainly like the truth for all candidates, and that's obviously not the case. So by collecting data, you can easily identify any trends that could be harming your ID commitments, and you can create an action plan to remediate it. So that's obviously from our standpoint how we look at it.
That's all very helpful. And I think something that you shared that helps me think about this is like the fact that if we have data, we don't actually do anything with that, like it's just useless, right? It's like why waste people's time doing that? Also, your time evaluating.
It's what we've seen happening is that often, for instance, within senior management, once again they see one Glassdoor review, and all of a sudden they think everything is wrong in the company. And that's also what we've seen in our data, that sometimes we could really pinpoint it to like one hiring manager in one office, and that like 99% of the hiring managers were doing great, but that there's just one person to focus on. And that's where data can actually help you to identify the real problems.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Kenysha, and then over to Paul.
Sorry, coming off of mute. It can be difficult, but yeah, I think that, you know, when we are focused on how to, you know, reinforce DEI, not only it is the business case, but I think that we have to make sure that our committee, right, is sound, right? Because if you have a DEI committee or EIG, they're often the voice of the masses. So you want to make sure you have consistent communication with them. And then also help them understand that they are an ambassador for IDEA, but not expected to fix the problems, you know, without any support. So we use our committee as a think tank. And we have launched a lot of community-based volunteer hours and a Future Leaders program as a result of the work with our committee. And then we also sponsor other nonprofits. So we want to make sure that our employees see that what we do through DEI is also in line with what we do as a company. So the community organizations that we sponsor are either tech related, music related, or a combination of both. So we sponsor other organizations like Words, Peace, and Life, Bite Back, the Creator House, and the National Center for Transgender Equality. And then our internship program was also born out of our DEI community. So I think that when you have IDEA as a focal point within your organization, the group of people that are advancing those ideas, whether it's a committee or ERG, should be heavily supported.
And tie that, all that you said was so perfect, and tying that work back to the overall goals and the metrics you're measuring, all of that is how you do drive impact over time. Can you just thank you for sharing? And we're going to go to Paul next on data.
Gosh, I love all of it. Plus one, I'm getting ideas myself based on some of the conversations that we're having. I think I'm going to take it on from a different point of view, because I think Kenysha and Lars covered the overall data function pretty strong. I think another metric that's maybe a softer one as an executive influencing in this space that you need to be assessing for is what I call the what if effect, meaning what if what people are telling us is true? And how much do the people, when they get feedback at the executive level, take into consideration the impact and believe what they're being told, or they try to explain and contextualize why this person feels that way or that function feels this way because. And what I'm trying to get at here is, regardless of if there are outliers and challenges that come up and bubble up, I think leadership right now, a piece of data you can get is when you are being told something's not okay, I'm not okay, women of color don't feel safe, etc., whatever kind of feedback you're getting, believe it. What if it's true? What if, even if we know why they feel that way, what if they still feel that way? And what if it's something that we're going to put intention behind? So when I say what if, it's really, really taking it seriously. It's taking seriously the impact that the culture, programs, processes are having, regardless of their intended effect. It might not mean you change the process. It might mean you need to better understand the community. It might mean that the process needs to be explained in a different way, or it might actually mean that the process is broken, right? Or a whole bunch of other things. But what if? And I think what I find myself, because in these leadership conversations or even interview debriefs, Lars, I know that's your world, you see it. People will like explain away a candidate that got like a thumbs up from everyone who interviewed, and then it goes to the final debrief, and all of a sudden it's like new skills that we never asked about are being brought up. Oh, I don't think they could do good at this. And it's like, we didn't interview for that, so it's listening to those things and saying, what if we trust what we hear? What if what we hear is true and it's having that impact? I think that's like a soft data point. It's maybe more philosophical, but I think for those of us in leadership positions, listen for that and coach people to listen for, no, I get it. And this person's an issue or there's a challenge here, but what if what they're saying is actually true? What if it was true? What would we do? How would we address it? What would that mean for our organization? And would our organization be happy if that was true? And I think it complicates and opens up a conversation. And I think to Lars's point, again, to close out, data works in both ways. Yep. You don't want to say, everyone's going to do bias reduction training, and here's the bias reduction training we bought from this company. Does everybody need it, or do certain people? Right? And I've been in so many unconscious bias trainings, and it gets so triggering sometimes. Yeah. And so I think, it's one of those things where calibrating your solution for the people that will benefit most from that solution, and not just doing blanket, equality kinds of programming. Everyone gets the same thing. We know that doesn't work. Who needs what? So use your data to determine who needs what. Don't try to give solutions to 5, 10, 20, 30,000 people that are the same. That doesn't make sense.
And that literally don't have that same impact that you're looking for, right? Right? It's not landing on people. And to your point, I've been through way too many implicit unconscious bias trainings. I'm done. But I hear you, Paul. One thing you said really, really just resonates with me when I think about that what if kind of mentality. And even for a leader asking themselves, like, what if I believed what these people were saying? Like, how might that change the outcome of how we are as an organization culturally, how we're performing, kind of what we stand for?
Yeah.
So I think that's a question that all leaders should be asking themselves as they're getting data, as they're looking at how they can improve their DEIB idea strategies. So I wanted to say thank you for sharing that, because I'm left over here like, what's next for me?
Because if you think about it, Jamie, if you ask yourself that question and the answer you have as a leadership or a group of leaders is, we still would keep it exactly the same and do the same, then you know your boundary, you know your value, and you know what your company stands for.
There you go.
You should be confident to give that transparent explanation back. Yep. But if you're not comfortable, then maybe you have to have, what I mean? It's just
there's more to explore.
Yeah.
There's more to explore. This is, y'all. Okay, I'm going to give us our last kind of closing question, and then we'll head over to the audience for chat and Q&A. One second over here. Woo. Okay, as we wrap up, is there one idea or DEIB program or an accomplishment you've been most proud of over the last few years or in your career? Kenysha, I'll go with you first, Paul, and then we'll end with Lars.
Sure. I'll go a few years back, and it was being the leadership liaison for 2 new employee resource groups that at the time were not considered your traditional resource groups, right? It wasn't the all women's group. It wasn't the Black employees group. It was 2 that were very important to that organization at the time. And it was the South Asian Employee Resources Group and our Abilities Employee Resources Group that were focused on both physical and mental differences. So the South Asian Resource Group came about because in our distribution facilities, we had a very large population of South Asian employees that felt like not only because they were in distribution, but because of their ethnicity, right? They often didn't feel like they belonged, but many had been there for 10 years or more, right? So we developed a support system for that group of employees. And of course, it spread across to our corporate office because there were lots of employees that identified as such, but they never had a place where they felt like they were truly supported. And then our Abilities Employee Resource Group really started to take shape, mostly because of physical ability differences, but it quickly turned to focusing on neurodivergence and mental health. And it really made a big impact at the company at the time. So I'm very proud of both of those.
When you talk about, well-being and engagement being so important to companies' outcomes, and those are 2, I think, excellent examples of how you really practice that in your leadership. So thank you for sharing, Kenysha. I'm going to go to Paul, and then we'll wrap up with Lars.
So transparently, I prepared a really different answer to this question. But I got to be honest today because it's been a week.
Come on. It's what we need.
You know what? I worked with Kenysha for a while.
Yep.
When Kenysha wasn't even in a formal DEI role, she was in a HR leadership role and still was driving DEI. And when I think about that job and all the other jobs where I've driven programs and projects and traveled and done stuff, there's a million examples. But when I actually think about what I'm proud of, and these are for the DEI practitioners who are out here listening, or the people who employ DEI practitioners, I'm most proud that I show up every day to do this work, regardless of how hard it is, regardless of how impacted and triggered I am by what's going on in the world, or my family might be, or my community. And I think doing this work takes grit and it takes agility that I don't think people understand, because in the morning you're influencing a board or talking to a CEO, and then 20 minutes later you're talking to an entry-level intern who's having a bad experience, and then an hour later you're trying to tell a CPO that a program they created is causing unintended bias and they need to rethink their program, and then you're going to go speak on a panel like this and try to give, and you do that.
Real. This is real life, Paul.
You do it all in a day. And so when I think of what I'm proud of, it's the little moments with employees on Slack or any messaging system. It is, and it's showing up, trying my hardest to get it right, and knowing that you're not always going to meet the mark or hit the mark, because it's so complex and it's so challenging. But my proudest moment actually is that I'm still in the work, and that I'm in the work with the people on this call, like, who show up to do it. It's not the programs, it's not the ROI, it's not that, it's this.
Well, Paul, you're speaking to my heart. You're literally getting me emotional over here today. Wow, I'm receiving that message, and I hope anyone else here who is a DIB practitioner, IDEA practitioner, anyone supporting us, please listen to what Paul just said, because for me, that is so critical. I can't tell you how many times people have said, Jamie, I'm so happy you're still here. And I'm like, they really see this. They see the impact day over day. And so I'm just receiving that right now. We're going to go over to Lars. Thank you, Paul. Anything you want to wrap us up with over here, Paul? Oh, sorry, Lars.
So we're a relatively small company from Amsterdam, but already in the early years, we managed to become a referent. And this means we were eligible to source talent worldwide and get them a working permit instantly. And actually, it has led to a very diverse workforce with so many different backgrounds. And it not only sparks innovation, it not only leads to a steep learning curve for everyone involved, but it's also a lot of fun. Yeah, if I'm like with all Dutch people in a room, it can also be fun. But like hearing things from different perspectives, for me, it's really a game changer. And next to that, I'm obviously super proud, and our software is helping so many forward-thinking companies to actually put their money where their rainbow logo is and measure how inclusive their hiring practices are. Because we had so many conversations with companies where they were, we're committed to IDEA and we saw the rainbow logo, but we have to spend some money to actually measure it. No, I need to look for a budget. But luckily, we see more and more companies prioritizing this also in this economy.
I love that. Yes, you all have done so well. This has been an amazing conversation for me. And, I want to make sure we get some time for our audience questions in just a moment. But let me just say this. Thank you all so much for sharing your perspectives, for going off script today, and providing all the great points about how your companies are putting employees first and focusing on equity and inclusion in all forms. I am leaving this conversation, you all have no idea, so inspired as I head to Double next week to talk to my team. So I just want to say thank you all. Before we move into the audience Q&A, I'm going to launch a quick poll to see who'd be interested in learning more about Greenhouse or our partner, Starred. We would love to hear from you. You should see the poll appearing on your screen now. Wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you so much for taking that. Also on your screen, on the right-hand side, you can find the Handouts tab. where you can download some more resources related to our discussion, including Greenhouse's new ebook that can give you even more insight into this specific topic. Okay, let's go ahead and move into a couple audience questions before we close things out today. And again, thank you everyone who submitted questions. The first question we have here: what's one piece of advice you'd give to help inspire other DEIB leaders and HR professionals to stay the course during these more challenging times? And anyone can answer if you have an answer for folks.
I'll start it off.
Please.
And this is wisdom that I learned from the amazing Kendall Castleberry Singleton, who's currently at Amazon, but our paths crossed at Twitter. She was a boss who taught me many of the things that I know now in this work. And she used to say, you have to have a posse. And I think that you have to have a posse. You got to have, a DM group, a chat group, a group of folks as a DEI practitioner that you can go to that are outside of your organization, that you can lean on, where you can vent safely and you can ask the hard questions and, and share in confidence, right? And I think without that perspective, because you need it, because this job is really challenging. Another quote from Candy is that this is being a leader of DEI is being a chief everything officer, meaning just this war broke out in this place. What should we do? Oh, let me go to my encyclopedia and look it up real quick. That's, but we are who people come to. So for me, it's about a posse. It's about having a group of folks that you can lean on in a community. And if you don't have one, building it. And for those listening, reaching out to any of us on this call, I think we'd all be happy to join your posse, but, link up, find other practitioners and ask questions.
Paul, I want to publicly give you your flowers. Same to you, Kenysha. I've been working with both of you around different DEI things. Thank you all for being part of my posse, holding me down when I was just trying to build out things and, just being seasoned leaders who I can go to. So I just want to say that publicly to both of you. And actually, this is going to be the only question we have time for. So does anyone else want to say anything, Kenysha or Lars?
No, thank you so much. I think Paul really closes out with some inspirational thoughts the last few minutes. So I appreciate being on this call today.
Agreed, 100%. Lars, anything you want to add?
Thank you, Jamie. It was a pleasure also having you as a host. It was spot on, I think.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for your audience questions. We are just at time, so sorry we didn't get to every question today. A huge thank you again to Kenysha, Paul, and Lars for adding your valuable insights to our panel today. It was really special for me to hear from each of you, and I'm sure for our audience as well. And thank you all to our attendees for joining us today and taking the time out of your busy days and schedules. The webcast will be ending shortly, but a survey will pop up on your screen after the event. So please help us by making sure you're sharing your thoughts about our conversation today. Thank you, everyone, and please enjoy the rest of your week.